This particular video is about another aspect of Rahu, which a lot of people have interest in, is about wealth apart from power. So we will cover the chart analysis of two very, very well-known politicians of the world. One is Mr. Donald Trump, and the second one is Mr. Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India. And we will see what kind of conjunctions or what role does Rahu play for these people. And we will try to understand the role of Rahu in our charts as well. Okay. So firstly, we will look at the placement of Rahu, and we will also go a little bit in the nakshatra level details so that we can identify if there is a certain nakshatra, or is the nakshatra Lord playing a significant role in power and wealth as well, right? So we all know that Rahu can really amplify wealth. I have made a couple of videos. I'm going to mention that on the time cards here, especially Rahu, how it can amplify wealth. I've also made another video on how to check and understand the position of Rahu. So make sure you watch those videos. I'm going to briefly explain that again before we jump into the chart analysis, which I'm sure all of you are looking at to see if you have any similarities in the chart, especially if you're a Leo or a Scorpio Ascendant. You can pay a lot of attention and see what other similarities you have and what kind of combinations are there on your chart. Especially if you have a debilitated moon. Very, very important, because the similarity in both their chart, there are quite a few similarities. But the main similarity in both their charts is a debilitated moon. Okay. So if you have a debilitated moon, don't be disheartened. I have made another video on moon and its debilitation and to do with mental health. I'm going to add the time card here. So watch that video as well. Okay. So before we jump into the analysis of their charts, let's understand quickly how Rahu is connected with power. Okay. So we know the story of Swarvanu. Swarvanu was the name of the demon that was later became into two different parts, Rahu the head and Ketu the body, because of the Sudarshan chakra of Vishnu. Okay. So they were one people. What was the motive of Swarvanu? What was Rahu's motive? Rahu's motive was to become immortal, which is to gain power. Okay. So Rahu, wherever it sits, it wants to gain power. And it usually wants to gain power not in the most principle-oriented way. Not like how Jupiter wants to gain power, right? Because Jupiter is the Karaka and significator of principles. Rahu wants to do it in a shortcut, right? Rahu doesn't want to wait like Jupiter, or doesn't have the patience of Saturn, although Saturn and Rahu get along, but it kind of wants it very quickly in a shortcut and wants to trick people by disguising, right? So Rahu definitely has the hunger of power, okay? And in some of the most well-known and successful politicians, we would see the influence of Rahu. So apart from Donald Trump and Narendra Modi, if you have anyone else's charts that you would like me to analyze, please go ahead and suggest those names. I'm happy to discuss those names. Also, give me their time of birth, because at times it's difficult to find the time of birth. I was able to find the time of birth of both these gentlemen, and which is why we can discuss this. And this is only for educational purpose. Please don't comment and say that if I am a supporter of the Republicans or I'm a supporter of BJP. I do not follow politics, and I have no interest in politics. For me, this is just an educational video for people who want to understand astrology and want to understand the role of Rahu, and maybe if you have interest in politics. Okay. So we have established certain things about Rahu and how Rahu wants power. Okay. So what other planet apart from Rahu symbolizes power? All right, if you guessed right, congratulations. So it's definitely the sun, because sun is the main authority. Okay, all the other planets are going around the sun. The sun is the king, right? And to some extent Saturn also, because Saturn is too far away from the sun, and Saturn doesn't really consider sun the king, because Saturn is the son of sun. And there is a story which maybe I'll talk about it some other day. And Saturn has his own little kingdom far away from the sun, right? So sun is definitely another planet which we have to look at if we want to see power. Okay. We also know in today's world, power and wealth go hand in hand. If you have power, you will most probably be wealthy. And if you're wealthy, you will definitely have some kind of a power, because your network circle and your connections will be similar people who are wealthy and who are powerful. So these two things go hand in hand, right? We know how to find out all the Dhan yogas. We have, I've already spoke about a couple. I've done a chart analysis of Dhan yoga of Elon Musk and the cricketer Kohli, right? Of Kohli. So check that video out, because Rahu plays a very important role, and they both are, made their money in the Rahu Mahadasha. I think they're still going through the Rahu Mahadasha. And how Dhan yogas and wealth and success is seen from Rahu. This particular video, we will focus primarily on how government and political related power and wealth can be seen through Rahu. Okay, which means sun has to play an important part. And apart from sun, the ascendant and the ascendant Lord. So we will look at three things. So if you're looking at your charts right now and you don't have and you're being impatient and you want to jump to the chart analysis, you can go to the description and the timestamps are there. But I always try to make people understand the logic of how we get to, how we derive and how it all makes sense before we look at a certain chart, right? So the ascendant Lord and the ascendant itself is very important, because that is what makes all the decisions. The moon to some extent, all right? The Lagna Lord needs to be strong. Now look at both these gentlemen. They are both in their late 70s, almost touching 80. So the ascendant needs to be fit. The ascendant needs to be capable of making the right decisions, identifying who's their friend, who's their enemy, to be able to communicate to the masses. All right. And we all know Rahu is also the significator or the karaka of mass communication, anything to do with masses, which is why it is also considered as the part owner of Aquarius, which again denotes the masses. We also have known that Rahu is also very intelligent. Why it was able to fool so many gods, until Mahadeva and Vishnu figured out that this was Rahu and it was not a god, and was eventually able to drink the Amrit as well and became immortal, right? So it's very intelligent. Rahu is also about mass communication, to do with the masses. Any technology is Rahu. Okay. The media industry, the film industry, anything that is not real is Rahu. And we also know that Rahu likes power. The main intention of Rahu was to gain power. Okay. So after establishing all these things, let's open up your chart, and we will first look into Mr. Donald Trump's charts. Okay. So if you're a Leo ascendant, you can pull up your charts and we can look at it. All right. So as we can see that he is a Leo ascendant. Okay. Now, although I want to go into D9 and D10, but the video is going to be too long. So we will go through all the planetary positions. We'll understand how Rahu plays up. And we'll also see if we can go into some of the nakshatras. All right. Also happy for any of your questions and comments. If you're a Leo Lagna or if you have any questions about the combinations. So we will go step by step. We will first look at the Lagna and the Lagna Lord, the most important thing. So he's a Leo Lagna and we can see the sun going to the 10,000 Taurus and it's conjunct with Rahu. Okay. If you can pull up his charts and go along with it, it'll be very easy. Also, we will look at Mars in the first house because any planet that goes to the first house becomes very, very important. Okay. So, like I said, this is a great example of Rahu being the Karaka of power and endless desire of power, and Sun being the government and the king and the authority, being in the 10th house of career. Okay. So, let's look at certain things, what it means. Firstly, I know the degrees are not showing up there, but I believe this is a very, very close conjunction, just 2 degrees from each other. And the conjunction is happening in a nakshatra called Mriksira Nakshatra. All right. Now you see the direct exchange here. Who is the Lord of Mriksira Nakshatra? The Lord of Mriksira Nakshatra is Mars. And Mars is going right back into Leo. And in Leo, Mars is sitting in Magha Nakshatra. And we all know what is Magha Nakshatra. Magha is the king's chair, which is why it sits in Leo. Okay. So we can see a direct exchange here between the Ascendant Lord, and the Lord of both these nakshatras, where Rahu and Sun are sitting in, is going back to the Ascendant. Not just that, we also have to see Mars. Mars is a natural malefic, we know that, right? But Mars is also going to the first house, which is the Lord of its 9th house, which is the house of Bhagya. So Mars happens to be one of the most powerful functional benefics for Leo ascendants, right? And Mars goes to the first house, and we know the first house is very, very strong house for Mars to be in. Okay. Now, it obviously does a lot of good because he's reached to become one of the most powerful men in the world, right? American president. But also, at times, I've heard people say that Donald Trump is capable of saying things which can be very provocative and could be very harsh. And that could be because of Mars in the Magha Nakshatra in Leo. All right. So if you have a similar placement, make sure that you are very, very careful about how you communicate, especially if you are communicating with a mass of people. For example, Donald Trump is obviously, if he's winning elections, he's talking to a whole group of people, like thousands and millions of people, and they are voting for him so that he wins the election, right? At times it could work for his favor as well, because sometimes politicians do provoke people to get votes. But at times with this kind of a placement, people can get too provocative as well. So someone with this kind of placement should always be careful with Mars, and then such powerful Mriksira Nakshatra as Rahu and Sun sitting very closely conjunct with each other can make a person very, very aggressive. All right. But for Mr. Trump, it's obviously done more good than bad. Let's look at the other planetary combinations. We can see this Jupiter, the Lord of the 5th house, the past life good karmas. All right. And also the Karaka for knowledge and wisdom is going to the 2nd house, causing a very, very powerful Dhan Yoga. We all know that Donald Trump had a lot of ancestral money, and I guess he made a lot of money doing his own business as well. So the 5th Lord going to the 2nd house, that's one Dhan Yoga. And then Mercury. Okay, so for all the Leo ascendants, Mercury is a very, very important planet for all Leos because Mercury rules your communication. And Mercury is also the main karaka for two of your most powerful money houses, which is your second house and your 11th house. Both are ruled by Virgo and Gemini. And if we see, it's forming an extremely powerful Dhan Yoga for Donald Trump. The Lord of the second house is going to the 11th house in its own house by Mercury. All right. Which is making a very, very powerful Dhan Yoga. Okay. Now let's look at certain other yogas. Okay. Which is, so if we look at the 10th house. Now, this conjunction of Rahu and Sun is a very, very powerful conjunction. Now, this conjunction can backfire for a lot of people because, when you have this conjunction, Rahu takes more dominance on the Sun. Okay, because Rahu is capable of causing an eclipse on the Sun. And people with this conjunction can easily do something in their life when they break the law and they get caught. Something as trivial as not filing a tax for 1 year and getting caught, or just not parking the car in the right place. It could be something as trivial, or it could be something very, very serious as well. So I don't know a lot about Donald Trump's history because I have not really studied American politics, but with this conjunction, it looks like there could have been many, many times Donald Trump would have had trouble with law and order. And he would have also had many, many loyal friends and very, very powerful friends. And we will look at that, not from this conjunction. We will look at the dispositor. You remember how I have explained to you, not just me, I'm sure many, many other astrologers, that wherever you see Rahu has no entity. So if Rahu is in Taurus, firstly, Rahu is exalted in Taurus and is very, very powerful in the 10th house. So if you're a Leo ascendant and if you have Rahu in Taurus, that means these people will do so many things in their lives. They would have tried this, they would have tried that, they would have tried every possible thing. The most productive industry for them, if Rahu is alone there, is the media industry or something that you have to be in the film industry or out there in the entertainment industry, be on the camera basically, do something creative, is very, very good, especially if it's in the Mrigashira Nakshatra, because Rahu in the Mrigashira Nakshatra, it does nothing but it wants to take control over the masses, because Mrigashira Nakshatra is also about the masses. Because, it's about Mriga, right? Mriga, they are in big groups. It's not a solitary hunter like a tiger, right? So, and Mriga is also a very active nakshatra. It's a very physical nakshatra. It's a nakshatra that, and Rahu, especially when it goes there, it wants to gain a lot of material, and things that give you comfort. And, at times people with, this, placement can really, really acquire a lot of wealth, because Taurus is the significator of assets, and Mrigashira again is a lot of activity. And Rahu being there can really drive a person to do great sportsman in physical activity. If Mars is very well placed, can be seen there. All right, so that's that. So I was talking about his connections, right, and connections with lawyers and stuff. Let's look at his 6th house. You see, the Lord of his 6th house and the Lord of his 7th house, okay, is the same planet, which is Saturn. Now, Saturn is not a very benefic planet for Leos, because it holds some kind of enmity with the Sun, right? And chart-wise also, it is the Lord of the 6th house. So Saturn goes to the 12th house and is conjunct with Venus. And they are sitting in the same nakshatra, quite closely conjunct in Punarvasu nakshatra. Now, this is what is very, very interesting, right? Because the dispositor of Rahu, like I said, is Venus, goes to the 12th house. We know Venus likes being in the 12th house, right? Because 12th house is the house of the other realm. 12th house is the imaginary world. And Venus has nothing to do with analytics and numbers. And Venus likes being there in the imaginative world, in the other realm, right? Also, the 12th house is the house of expenditure, and Venus likes to spend. Another reason why Venus likes to be there. So very interesting conjunction. So first we'll look at this conjunction, try to make sense of it. We've already looked at Rahu and Sun, his Lagna Lord. We've looked at Mangal, Mars in his first house. We have looked at Jupiter and Mercury to some extent, giving him the Dhan yogas. But the Saturn and Venus, okay? Now, the 7th Lord going to the 12th house and going 6th from itself. What does that mean? All right, if you have guessed it right, it's brilliant. And also Venus there, Saturn and Venus, right? It is not a very good placement for partnership, not just business partnership, but also your wife, your marriage. So what I have checked is Donald Trump. This is his second or third, I believe, his third marriage. And every time I believe he's had a pretty long-term marriage. It's not that, I'm not sure about that. Correct me if I'm wrong. Please comment and let me know if I'm going wrong. But as far as I know, this is his third wife, and he has quite a few children with the third wife. And also it goes to the 12th house of foreign lands, so which means his wife has something to do with foreign lands, or she is from a different country. Okay. Now we will talk a little bit about the nakshatra, which is a very, very interesting nakshatra. Okay. It is the Punarvasu nakshatra. This conjunction of Saturn and Venus is happening in Punarvasu nakshatra, which is the nakshatra of quite the opposite of the nakshatras which have a lot of desires, like Mrigashira or even to some extent Aradhra. So this is a nakshatra of Lord Ram. This is a nakshatra of fulfilling duties and principles. Usually people that have a strong Punarvasu nakshatra are very disciplined, principle-oriented people, and they do a lot of good things for the world. And Saturn being there is pending karma. So Donald Trump, if he hasn't yet, I'm sure he will do a lot of good things for the people. Maybe he has done it already. I really don't know. I don't have an opinion on politics. But when Saturn usually goes there, people do end up doing a lot of good things for the common people, and usually follow the righteous path. Okay. So it's a good combination of Rahu and Sun, of breaking the law and then following the righteous path, right? It also has a great significance. It also signifies, Lord Ram lost his kingdom. He lost his wife. Now these are similarities with Donald Trump, because he's had a few divorces, right? And then he wins back the kingdom. Okay, after fighting and rescuing his wife. So that is the story of that. This is what is Punarvasu nakshatra. We see a lot of similar behavior, especially if your moon is in Punarvasu, and if you have a strong Punarvasu in your charts, right? We will look at Punarvasu here. Why? Because the dispositor of Rahu, Venus, is sitting in Punarvasu nakshatra. So this nakshatra becomes very powerful. And Saturn, we all know, Saturn is your karma, is your pending karma. And when Saturn also sits in the same nakshatra, that nakshatra becomes very powerful for you. Okay. So, the other thing I remembered while I was reading his charts is, I believe the Mrigashira nakshatra has an activation age of 79, which is what he's running right now. So I don't know. I'm not sure. I think he's running for the elections next. If the nakshatra activates, we can't just look at one person's charts to determine if they will win or they will lose. And if any astrologer is looking at one person's charts and saying that person will win, isn't doing a complete analysis. You have to look at the competitors' charts and see which one is stronger before giving a strong analysis that this particular candidate will win the election. So with his current charts I think he's going through Jupiter Mahadasha. I'm going to give a snapshot of his Mahadashas on the side so you can analyze when he gained power. I believe he became president right at the end of Rahu Mahadasha. How interesting is that? Right? And during Jupiter Mahadasha, he had lots of problems. Right? I think the last couple of years that's when he lost against Joe Biden, and I guess there were quite a few lawsuits against him as well during his Jupiter Mahadasha. But I will leave that question for you because it's very interesting. Jupiter was transiting through some difficult houses for him, because when you go through Jupiter Mahadasha, we have to look at the Jupiter transits. And right as now, as we speak right now, Jupiter is transiting on top of his Sun and Rahu. And before that, Jupiter was transiting through his 9th house, which is also 6th from the moon. We can't ignore the moon. Whenever we're looking at transits, we have to look at transits from the moon, right? His moon is also debilitated, and moon is in Jyeshtha Nakshatra, very important. I believe he was not the oldest son in the family, and he was given the topmost authority in his family. So let me know if I'm right about that, or because if you have Jyeshtha Nakshatra, your moon is in Jyeshtha Nakshatra, even if you're not the oldest in the family, your father or your father or your grandfather, whoever is the commanding authority of your family, will treat you as the oldest, or even if they don't, you will start behaving like the oldest, because Jyeshtha is the significator of the oldest. Okay, so even if Donald Trump had an older brother, I don't think he was very significant, or even if he was, he did not really play the older brother's role in his life. Okay. So that's all I can, I mean, there's lots more to analyze, but I want to keep it open for questions and not go into too many details. But it was good to look at such strong combinations in the Mrigshira Nakshatra and the Punarvasu Nakshatra. Also with the moon in the 4th house debilitated, people could be very secretive about their personal life. So we may not know a lot about Donald Trump. Leos usually are very secretive about their personal life because Scorpio sits in their 4th house. But moon being a luminary, it's not a very good position because it could bring, any luminaries could bring light to a person's secrets, especially the ones that are happening in closed doors. So this is my analysis. So let me know what you think. Let's look at Narendra Modi's charts. All right. So if you're a Scorpio ascendant, happy to get into discussions if you have any comments. So as we can see, this is a debilitated moon, but it's forming a very, very powerful yoga. We will go step by step. We will look at the first house and we see the first house Lord is in the first house, which is Mars. All right. And we also see moon in the first house, which debilitates the first house. But this debilitation is not really a debilitation because the Lord of Scorpio is sitting there. So this is a yoga called Neech Bhang Raj Yoga. It's a very powerful yoga, which is what Narendra Modi has on his charts. And also, if you see the similarity, I'm not sure if you saw the last analysis of Donald Trump's chart. His 9th Lord was Mars and it was sitting in the first house. Here the 9th Lord is Moon and it's sitting in the first house. Similarity, right? Which means the most beneficial planet, your most Karaka planet, the Lord of the 9th, your Bhagya, your luck, your principals, your gurus, significator of long distance travel. Your most beneficial planet is sitting right in your ascendant. Very, very powerful yoga. Right? Also, Mars is the Lord of his 6th house, winning over enemies. How does a politician win? A politician gets elected as prime minister only if he defeats the opposition candidates, right? So there you go. So first, the Lord of the 6th itself is Mars, and Mars is sitting there. So which is why Aries and Scorpios are usually very competitive people. We see lots of sports people. We see lots of sports people from Aries and Scorpio. We see lots of people in the army. In the secret services. Competitive sports are seen from this kind of a placement. All right. Now let's dig a little deeper. Let's look at his 10th house. Now his 10th house there's Leo sitting there. Leo is the significator of administrator or the government. So 10th house career becomes Leo. And then we have a conjunction of Saturn and Venus there. Okay. We will get to this conjunction in a bit. Before that, let's look at Rahu and see how Rahu is involved. Now, you must be wondering, there is no Rahu and Sun conjunction. And how is Rahu helping Narendra Modi as a politician, right? So, firstly, Rahu is in the 5th house. 5th house is the original sign of Leo, the government. So, Rahu sits in Pisces in the 5th house. Okay. Now, we know that it's not a very good placement for Rahu. Why? Because Rahu likes stable signs. For example, it's friends with Mercury. It likes the sign of Taurus. It likes the sign of Gemini. It likes the sign of Saturn, right? But it is not very fond of being in a watery sign because there's no stability there. And Jupiter is quite well placed. The dispositor, we always look at the dispositor. The dispositor is in the 4th house in Aquarius. Who owns Aquarius? Now we know Rahu is the part owner of Aquarius. So there we can call this a bit of a Parivartan Yoga. We're just looking at the basics. Now we'll get into Nakshatras. All right. And then we see Saturn is sitting in the 11th house conjunct with Ketu and Mercury. So quite a few conjunctions here. So we have to be able to read conjunctions to understand, because there are 2 conjunctions in the 1st house and there are 2 conjunctions in the 10th house. We need to make some sense out of this. Okay. But before this, we will start with Rahu. We will see how Rahu is playing a role. Yeah. So let's see which nakshatra is Rahu sitting in. We all know Rahu is sitting in Pisces. And Rahu is sitting in Uttar Bhadrapada nakshatra. A very, very interesting nakshatra. Now this nakshatra's Lord is Saturn. Now this is a nakshatra which is very much in tune with Pisces. This is a nakshatra of higher learning. It's a nakshatra of renunciation. It's a nakshatra of moksha. It's a nakshatra of being in solitude. Okay. So we have seen as President Narendra Modi trying to find peace and solitude by meditating. Okay. By going to religious places. By being solitary. I mean, they find peace of mind in solitude because Pisces is the sign of solitude. And especially Uttar Bhadrapada is more about solitude. Because it's ruled by Saturn. And Saturn here does something very interesting. Now, Saturn and Rahu, whenever Rahu sits in a Saturn's nakshatra, Saturn and Rahu firstly are friends. They're not enemies from each other. So Saturn has at times the capability, especially if you're sitting in Saturn's nakshatra. We will not go to the pada because it'll go into too much detail. But usually Saturn is able to give some kind of a target to Rahu, because what Rahu lacks is touch targets, right? Rahu has desire, but Rahu doesn't know when to end. And Saturn is about setting very specific goals and long-term goals. So Saturn is capable of giving Rahu some patience here and use Rahu's brains for long-term planning. So this I would consider as a very, very powerful placement of Rahu, even though if it's in the 5th house and it's in the sign of Pisces, where it is sitting in Uttar Bhadrapada Nakshatra. Okay. Now let's see where Saturn is, because it's sitting in Saturn's. If we dig deeper, we will be able to find some answer how Rahu plays a role. Firstly, Rahu from the 5th house is giving its 9th aspect on the Lagna, and 2 of the planets are sitting there. The main Neech Bhang Raj Yog is happening there, and as you can see that Narendra Modi was very powerful during the Mars Mahadasha. You already can see the Mahadasha years on the side. Now Saturn sits in Leo in Uttar Falguni. And not just that, Sun sits in Uttar Falguni, Ketu sits in Uttar Falguni, Mercury sits in Uttar Falguni. Isn't it really, really interesting? 4 planets are sitting in Uttar Falguni. Saturn sitting on the Leo side, and Sun, Mercury and Ketu sitting on the Virgo side. Right? Rahu's Nakshatra Lord, Saturn, sits in Leo in the 10th house and sits in Uttar Falguni Nakshatra, and Mercury, Sun, Ketu, all conjunct, but they are sitting on the side of Uttar Falguni, which means they are in very low degrees, and Saturn is at very high degrees, and Saturn is also Narendra Modi's Atma Karaka, the planet holding the highest degree. I believe it's 29 degrees and few minutes. Okay. So we must understand the Uttar Falguni Nakshatra. Firstly, Uttar Falguni Nakshatra's Lord is the Sun. Okay. And this particular Nakshatra is, the symbol of the Nakshatra is a bed, but it's a bed which was used by the Panchayat leaders. Back in the day, this bed was used to do negotiations. It was a cart. It was not really a bed. It was like a charpai, I will try to get a picture and put it up there so that the Western audience understand. I'm sure a lot of the Indian audience understand, because we have panchayats still going on in our country. So the Sarpanch would sit there and make some major decisions, even law and order wise, or trade, business, commerce decisions were made there. So this is a fantastic nakshatra with so many planets sitting there. Now, if we go into each one of them, we have to look at the padas. But this particular nakshatra plays a major role in Narendra Modi's becoming such a powerful chief minister of Gujarat, and then eventually becoming one of the most powerful prime ministers of India. All right. Because firstly, it's ruled by Sun. As we know, Sun is the government, Sun is the king. And we spoke in the initial part of the video of Rahu wanting power. And we have a direct connection between Rahu, Sun and Leo happening in Narendra Modi's charts, which is not really visible unless you go dig deeper and look into his natal chart. I'm sure if you go to D9, you will see way more things. His Venus is in Purva Falguni, which is again Venus's own nakshatra. And it's Vargottam, it's in 15 degrees, very powerful in Leo. Which means Vargottam means if in the D9 also it sits in Leo. I believe Rahu goes to Leo as well in his D9 chart, which means his initial part of his life might have been a little difficult and he struggled. And the moment he was aligned with what he was supposed to do, which is be in the government and be aligned with the sun, because there is so much sun going on in his charts. It is all about being a part of the government and being a part of governing a nation and being the prime minister. Very interesting, isn't it? Quick look at his Mars and Moon. Mars is in Vishaka Nakshatra. Vishaka Nakshatra is represented by like a, when you win a war and you come back, they decorate and they make a nice big gate to respect the warriors, the war heroes. So that is what is the sign of Vishaka Nakshatra. All right. And Mars being there is like the warrior that has won battles, and it's about winning. Winning from something that you have lost before. Okay. It is also a nakshatra that is that resonates with some kind of saints, some sadhus as well. All right. And Moon is fantastically placed in Anuradha Nakshatra. Now, I know it's debilitated there, but Anuradha Nakshatra is known for making long-term plans. All right. So as we can see, there is a long-term tenure. Narendra Modi has ruled, or he's been the Prime Minister of India for quite a long term. Right. And now we understand the role of Rahu and how Rahu's nakshatra placement resonates with Sun and Leo and power. Direct connection. All right, that's all I have for you. If you have any questions or if you have any more observations, I'm happy to answer your questions. Please, I think most of you know I'm very active on comments, so feel free to drop me a note and I'll be happy to respond. If you found this video useful, click on the subscribe button and hit the like button. Thank you very much for your time, and that's all I have for you right now. Bye-bye.